welcome to Things Are Getting Strange in X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I have news.
Oh, you have news. What's yours?
My news is one we can't entirely talk about yet, but we'll have to bear it in mind for next season.
Okay.
So basically, there was a reveal this week on Twitter, which was covered by a few places. I saw it on the Mary Sue first, and then a bigger write-up in the Rolling Stone, which is there's a song in Dreamland 2, which people have been looking for the author of for years.
Okay.
And basically, they've just managed to get clarification it was written for the episode, it's not a real song.
Okay.
And there's a comment from Chris Carter about how they generally didn't have licensed songs in the episode, in any episode, which is fair, because I think we noted that it doesn't happen often at all.
Yeah, I know Travellers this week had a song that was written especially for it and things like that.
Yeah, but we've had things like Red Right Hand was in Dwayne Barry, and the one we forgot about last time we discussed this, which was Beyond the Sea, which had Beyond the Sea in it.
Yeah, true, true.
But yeah, so there was some X-Files news this week, and it basically was the result of a long-running exploration by fans on Twitter, and I think we'll save a lot of it for when we get to Dreamland 2. But yeah, so X-Files got into the news again this week. What was your news?
I have a date for the next X-Files Fan Fest.
Ooh.
These are the ones like there was earlier this year at Saratoga Springs. So it is held both across Saratoga City Centre and also at the X-Files Preservation Centre, of course. But it is going to be June the 28th to the 29th next year in 2024.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's just a bit of a save the date for now. Though if you go on their Twitter and website, they are currently looking for vendors, so if you're in any way interested in having a stall, do get in touch with them for that. They've also announced a couple of guests, which include Arlene and Mitch Pleggy at the moment.
Oh, very cool. We're perfectly willing to be flown out again if anyone wants to pay for us to go.
Anyone wants to send Things Are Getting Strange on location.
I mean, it'd be kind of cool. It'd be a first for us as well.
Yeah, especially as we got COVID and couldn't go to that screening in London earlier this year.
Yeah, that was frustrating.
I'll keep you up to date if they announce any more guests or anything like that for the FanFest next year. We're early days, of course, at the moment.
Very cool. Okay, so first up this week, we have Travellers, directed by William A. Graham, written by John Shaban and Frank Spotnitz, and first broadcast on the 29th of March 1998. Guest stars. Dean Aylesworth is young Bill Mulder, who has shown up before, but has not been in much of note.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Much better is Frederick Lane, who played the young Arthur Dales, who we've seen in loads of things, like Con Air. Wait, no, he was in Con Air, but that's not what we remember him from. Men in Black, where he's the guy who gets exploded on at the start.
Yep, he is.
Dark Knight Rises.
Okay.
Amityville 4, of course.
Yep.
Babylon 5, Sliders, Firefly. We know him best as Old Yellow Eyes from Supernatural. Thanks, fellas. American Horror Story Asylum. And he's in Westworld, which I don't remember at all.
No, I don't remember him being in Westworld. I think his role in Amityville is my personal favourite.
Yeah, it's hard to be really traumatised by a ugly lamp.
Yeah. If you haven't seen Amityville 4, it's the best one.
It's an absolute hoot. For the wrong reasons. It's not meant to be funny. I don't think it's meant to be funny.
How can it not be funny?
It's based on the book, but I think it's like... Isn't it Amityville About Time is also based on the same source material, I think?
Is it?
Yeah, and that one came out... That's actually more horror-y, even if it's still stupid.
Yeah, true, but it's no Amityville 4.
It is not. Okay, so also we have Garrett Dillahunt, who played Edward Skur, who is on Last House on the Left, the remake.
Okay.
Looper will show up in Millennium and is in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Eileen Pedd, who played Mrs. Skur, is in Millennium. She's in Final Destination 2, The Core, Freddy vs. Jason, Death Note, the Netflix one, and we previously saw her in Terma. Jane Perry played Dorothy Branson, who is primarily a voice actress again, but not quite the same. She's done some dub stuff, which is Dragon Ball Z, but she was also in Alien Isolation, Soma, Mass Effect Andromeda, and Control. But no one specific in Control, just various voices.
Oh, I see.
And last, but by no means least, is Darren McGibbon, who plays Arthur Dales, the elderly version, who was in Captain America, the 90s version.
Oh.
The old version.
Oh dear.
Man from U.N.C.L.E. He was, of course, the Night Stalker and also Kolchak the Night Stalker. And he'll show up in Millennium.
Oh, cool. So, would you like to give us a synopsis for this one?
Yes, and for clarification, we're getting these from Wikipedia. just because a whole plagiarism thing blew up this week, and, I don't want to get accused of anything in future. In Wisconsin, a man named Edward Skur is shot by a police officer during an eviction. The last word he says is Mulder. Mulder, at this point, is working in the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit in 1990, and he believes the man may have some connection to his father, Bill. Mulder discovers that Skur was reported to have died in 1952, and seeks out Arthur Dales, a retired FBI agent. At first, Dales is reluctant to discuss the case and warns Mulder away. However, Mulder's threat of a subpoena persuades Dale to tell his story. In a flashback to the 1950s, Dales and his partner Hayes Michael are sent to arrest Skur for being a communist. When Dales is told that Skur hanged himself while in custody, he feels guilty and returns to Skur's house to apologise to his wife. While waiting there, he sees Skur alive and tries to capture him. In the following struggle, an appendage emerges from Skur's mouth, and Skur is forced to flee when a neighbour interrupts the fight. Both Michael and Ray Cohn warn Dales to change his report about the attack. He does so but feels guilty. Later, Dales and Michael are called to investigate the death of a German doctor in Chevy Chase, Maryland. The local police deny calling them, and Dales finds a coaster for a bar with "Come Alone" written on the back. There he meets Bill Mulder, an agent from the State Department. Bill tells him that Skur was experimented on along with 2 other men who later killed themselves. Skur killed the German doctor in revenge for what was done to him, and he will kill Dales and Michael too. Dales tries to warn Michael by phone, but is unable to prevent his murder. Dales tries to investigate his partner's death, but Cohn swiftly covers it up. A secretary at the FBI, Dorothy Branson, helps Dales find a file that mentions Gissing, one of the 2 test subjects. Gissing's body is still in the morgue, and Dales convinces the technician to cut the body open, where they find a strange creature has been sewn into Gissing's chest. Dales goes to Skur's wife and tells her what was done to her husband and that he wants to expose the experiment. Skur's wife then goes to their bomb shelter to tell Skur, but he instead overcome by the parasite and kills her. Cohn brings Dales before J. Edgar Hoover, who convinces him to help bring in Skur. They take Dales back to the bar to meet Skur, who then attacks Dales. Bill and the other agent hesitate before entering the bar because they think Dales will be dead before they enter, but when they do, they find that Dales has managed to handcuff Skur and taken him alive. In 1990, Mulder is dismayed to hear that his father was involved with this. He asks Dales how Skur possibly escaped, and Dales speculates that someone might have helped Skur escape, hoping that the truth of what was done to him may one day be revealed. The episode ends with a final flashback with Bill Mulder driving Skur out into the middle of the countryside, giving Skur the keys to the car and walking away.
Thank you.
I like the episode, but I have so many questions.
I didn't think it was as fun as I remembered it being. I remembered actually liking this episode a lot more than I ultimately did.
Okay, that's interesting. I think, well, one thing just before I get to bring it up, because it's one of the great bits of trivia for the episode, is Darren McGivern is one of the great X-Files guest stars in the fact they failed twice to get him in before this one.
Oh, this is Kolchak.
This is Kolchak from Kolchak Night Stalker, one of the influences on the X-Files, so getting him in makes sense. But he was meant to play Senator Matheson at the start of season 2. I
have a feeling he was also their first pick to be Mulder's dad as well.
Yeah, and since they managed to fail to get him both times, they convinced him to be Arthur Dales.
That's nice. I'm glad they finally got him.
Oh yeah, and he gets 2 appearances, and then it gets a bit complicated, because we'll come back to both Darren McGivern and Frederick Lane later. This isn't the last we'll see of them.
No. The other kind of interesting thing I think about this episode is the inspiration behind it, because it's vaguely based on a real person.
Oh, yeah, I think you mentioned this.
Yeah, it's, the guy it's all inspired by the Hollywood blacklist, which is kind of something that occurred because of the communist scare in America in the 1950s, where a lot of predominant actors and screenwriters got blacklisted because they were accused of having communist sympathies. But one in particular was a man called Howard Dimsdale, who wrote under the pseudonym Arthur Dales. But Dimsdale himself was a screenwriter who was affected by the Great Blacklist, and he actually also was a man who taught both, I think it was Spotnitz and Shaban.
Okay.
So this was their inspiration in writing the episode.
That's kind of cute. For more on that and the House Un-Americans Committee, HUAC, or however you want to refer to it, Maggie Mae Fish released a video on YouTube recently about it.
Oh, did she?
Yes. So she's going into the whole, the actual behind-the-scenes stuff, how Ronald Reagan was actively involved with this, even though he was an actor at the time.
It's bizarre.
Well, it's because he was working his way up the political chain at that point.
Oh,
This is before the presidency, so this is him in the ascendant. And the kind of not terribly nice things he was doing.
I mean, I don't know that much about it as an English person, but...
No, we don't get a lot of it. We see it come up a few times, but it seems like it was basically... It was less about communism is actually a smokescreen. Because she does this actually in the video where basically it's the clip from Clue, communism is just a red herring, is basically what was going on here. It was never about communism. It's an excuse for what they were trying to do. Because it also involved strikes, and this was why it was made at this point, because it's connected to the current strikes for the writers.
Yeah,
Guild.
of course.
So, yeah, I'll put a link in one of the descriptions for that, because it's an interesting watch.
Yeah, it might be good for people to watch it if they want a bit more background on this.
Yes, especially if you don't really know much about it, because to be fair, we only know that whole thing of people being accused of communism and that ruining their lives. Like it did in this episode.
Yeah. And it is shown that basically it's just a way to discredit and remove people you don't like.
Yes, because there's a bit where Cohn directly threatens Arthur Dales by just saying he'll just call him in front of the committee and ask him the question.
And he says, but I'm not a communist, and they say, kind of, who cares?
Well, no, you are if I say you are.
Yeah.
And that's kind of terrifying, and as well as where it's like Arthur Cohn is a real person.
I've
got to admit, and it's a weird personal failing, that whenever I see J. Edgar Hoover in anything, it wasn't so much in Muses of a Cigarette Smoking Man, because it's the same guy.
Yeah, I thought it was the same guy.
But
it's a good look for him, to be fair.
He is a good look, but J. Edgar Hoover always just makes me kind of laugh as a concept. It's not a physical appearance thing or anything like that. It's because the context I invest in are Ghostbusters, with the whatever you imagine. If you imagine J. Edgar Hoover will appear and destroy us. And Clue, which is he's on everyone else's phone. Why won't he be on mine?
In real life, though, he was a monster.
He was absolutely appalling person, but he feels like a punchline whenever I see him in things, just because it's an absurdity having J. Edgar Hoover. But yeah, in this one he actually is. You get he's a credible threat in this one.
Yeah.
Not so. Muse thinks he seems to be kind of bumbling person that Cancer Man would run rings around.
Yeah.
In this one, he's kind of there's actual palpable menace from this guy.
I like the inference of either Cancer Man or Cancer Man's forerunner in this as well, because in the scene with Cohn, I think there is a man standing in the corner smoking in the background. Yes,
I can't remember who. There is a speculation in one review or other that this might be Young Cigarette Smoking Man, which is odd given he's been cast twice already.
Yeah, that's why I didn't think it was him, but I thought maybe this is... He's clearly got a link with the Syndicate, or that sort of sense, some kind of shadow cabal.
Yeah.
In the background.
And he's doing the pose.
Yeah.
And everyone smokes anyway.
Just the same as he was in Pilot.
Yeah. I think mentioning the Syndicate, though, brings us into one of the episode's failings, I think. In that, as far as I can tell, this has absolutely nothing to do with the conspiracy.
No.
But it should. This absolutely should be part of the conspiracy.
Especially as we've seen the links with World War II and the Syndicate in the past in 731 and that ilk.
Exactly.
And Paperclip as well.
And even Piper Maru and Apocrypha, where we had this same young Bill Mulder interviewing the survivor of the sub.
Yeah, but we've had that idea of them kind of... Well, it still is Paperclip, isn't it? Them taking scientists with particular skills that will benefit the American government. We've got that idea in this of whoever the German scientist is, sorry, I've forgotten his name, and his kind of xenotransplantation program that they've kind of adopted.
Yeah, which is I don't think Men in Black was out at this stage, but I can't help but think it feels like they watched Men in Black and panicked. Because in Men in Black you have the whole thing of teeny tiny alien riding inside another, basically a vessel.
Yeah.
And it feels like, I don't think it's true, but it feels like that was like the intent for this episode, and then someone panicked when they saw Men in Black or heard about Men in Black and said, people are going to laugh at us.
And so they turned it into what?
The spider thing.
Yeah, the notes I saw about this episode called it the alien spider.
Yeah, and we never get to the bottom of what it was, what they hoped to achieve by doing this at all.
Its behaviour is kind of like a trapdoor spider, but a trapdoor spider using a human as a kind of host rather than living in a hole in the ground.
Yeah, and the thing that really got me watching it through, because it turned out I didn't remember the episode properly at all, because I thought this was a transferring parasite. But no, it's actually really weird, because Edward Skur is going to cough up the spider thing, it's going to crawl into another person, desiccate that person, and then crawl back down his throat?
As far as we can tell.
And to me, it's a case of, surely the spider parasite is the thing in control, because that's what he implies when he attacks his wife.
But he can't control it anymore.
So as soon as it's left his body, he should be able to then run in the opposite direction. This is a really weird episode.
It's the point of the study I don't get, because xenotransplantation isn't a foreign concept because we have things like pig's hearts.
Yeah.
So you have the idea of grafting a part of an animal into a human being and it being beneficial in some way. This thing, it's unclear what it is, where it came from, if it is alien, what its nature is, if it's something occurring naturally in the world. But what the benefit is either way, because you have two kinds of ways that parasites can interact with people. It's either, if it's parasiting, it's kind of not beneficial in any way. It's using the humans as a mean to end, like fleas on a cat.
Yeah, tapeworms. That kind of
Tapeworms, yeah. It probably won't kill its host because it's a bad parasite if it does, but it's not benefiting its host in any way either.
Yeah, and it's not going to do any good long term. It'll try not to kill you, but it can make mistakes.
Or your other one is symbiosis, which means it's both of them are benefiting in some way from this relationship, like Venom and the parasite in Venom.
I love the fact we've had to jump to... There's not a lot of... Actually, there are a few real-world symbiosis things, but Venom's an easier one. It's like those...
you have ideas...
The birds with the crocodiles.
Yeah, or Remora on sharks.
Yeah.
Is they're eating parasites on the sharks and in turn the sharks protecting them. That would be real-world symbiosis.
Venom's more fun. Let's go for Venom.
Yeah. But this one doesn't seem to be either.
No. It's a weird neither situation, which is very confusing.
But in the same time, when we're saying America's taking these kind of horrible German and Japanese scientists like we've seen previously in the X-Files, in every other occurrence, America is benefiting from this in some way. In this one, what are they gaining from this program?
If we were being really charitable, you could see it as a realistic thing, which is one of these excuses I don't like in fiction of, this would be more realistic if this happened. In the real world, though, you would say if they've just swept up all the Nazi scientists, you haven't picked up Joseph Mengele, but you've picked up someone who's in his ilk, because this is going into a Mengele kind of direction, isn't it?
Of experiments on humans, yeah.
And so basically, the whole thing is, you remember Werner von Braun and things, it's a case of, you also have picked up the crackpot scientist who doesn't know what he's doing.
Mm.
And I think that's charitably how you have to interpret this episode, given it doesn't go anywhere. But that's really irritating, that you've got the bad scientist.
I tried to put my logic in it of where you could use this program, and it's a bizarre way is the only thing I could think of is some weird kind of assassination, which doesn't exactly work because it's unclear who's in control of this. But you have somebody with something that lethal in his gullet, who's been dropped into an enemy situation, who might be able to get close and in with the person you want to kill, and then the trapdoor spider does the rest.
Yeah, I can see that. But
I think there's easier ways to kill people on that basis.
There are much easier. And also, not leave a mystery behind. Because you're leaving desiccated corpses behind, which is...
kind of like the bodies in The Mummy.
Yeah, it's not subtle. I mean, there's so many other weird things to pick at. It's like, Bill Mulder letting Edward Skurr go at the end. Sure, Bill, that feels off for you, but why not? Don't really get how he managed to then last the other 40 years not being picked up until they tried to evict him from this house. I also don't get why his last word is Mulder. Because I think I said this at the time, and you mentioned Citizen Kane, the very famous dying words. But Citizen Kane, Rosebud means something to Kane. Mulder is a guy Skurr met in the 50s, and he hasn't talked to since.
Who possibly saved his life.
That's not how you do dying words, is it? Especially if Mulder was with him. Sure, if Mulder had been present, but I don't get it.
It's also a bit weird that apparently, even though we've seen he can barely control the spider, he's gone 30 years without killing.
Well, there's a dead body in the bathtub, so he has killed people. But it's not clear why no one has picked up on this happening.
Yeah.
Given, I don't know, they picked up on some of the other people. I think they saw the trail of bodies for Skurr, didn't they?
But it's been killing a lot and frequently,
Yeah.
Skurr's little spider.
So the whole structure of the episode is just a bit strange, and I don't get that either.
I will say I like it for a special effect, though. Both the mummified corpses look pretty good, and so does the spider itself.
It does. And I also say, put a big pin in the spider thing, because I'm going to have to come back to this when we get to Dark Skies. Just because there's a very specific thing for Dark Skies involving this. Which I think Dark Skies actually predates the X-Files on this one, so It's very odd. I don't know who's influencing who at this stage. We should talk about a weird continuity thing, and we missed it for The Unusual Suspects.
The wedding ring?
The wedding ring. Mulder's married right now, which is an interesting detail that never comes up.
Yes. Apparently, from what I read online, This is David Duchovny's idea because he wants this kind of mysterious dark past to Mulder that never gets alluded to, but Chris Carter hated it and threatened him that after this episode, if the wedding ring appeared again, he was going to write in that Mulder was married.
Oh, in the present?
Yeah. But it's because David Duchovny wanted this air of mystery. However, on the internet, which is this newfangled thing that's aroused at the time, it caused a minor scandal with fans being very distressed about this one little detail. And especially the fact that David Duchovny, the way he sits in the episode and stuff, he's deliberately kind of drawing your attention to that ring.
Yeah, that's more obvious. It's slightly more subtle. He's smoking at this point as well.
Mm.
But that's harder to catch. The wedding is much easier to see. I mean, we can safely say a few things. It wasn't, I've forgotten her name, from England.
Oh, Phoebe Green.
It's not Phoebe Green. That would have come up in that episode if he was married to her. We know it's not that. We assume, since he's no longer wearing a ring, he's divorced in the present.
Yeah. It's never ever mentioned, though, apparently, again after this point, and the ring doesn't appear again after this point because of Chris Carter's threat.
Yeah. I also saw that quote, and one thing that occurred to me on it, and if you look back at some of the other discussions about other big events in the episodes, is there's a camaraderie, or at least a sort of working together feel to David Duchovny and Chris Carter that they don't have with Gillian Anderson. Because it seems like Colony, David Duchovny was actually really involved with writing that plot, and Gillian Anderson has never had that equivalent experience, it feels. And I don't think I've ever seen a note of a discussion between her and Chris Carter about some aspect of her past.
Yeah.
I think she's always given it. She didn't seem to have an input into it. And say what I can't say for certain exactly what her attitude was at the time. It does feel like this is late 90s sexism kicking in even now, of the men are allowed to do things. Gillian Anderson, you're lucky to get this job at all. We almost recast you with someone else. Because there was that thing very early on that they wanted someone taller because David Duchovny is so tall.
I think there is an episode that we haven't had yet that was kind of directed by Gillian Anderson, but there are more episodes that David Duchovny seems to have a hand in.
Yes, he's either written them or he will get to directing a number of them later on, and I think she gets one.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it is, but I'm sure there is one a little later that she does.
Yeah, it's very lopsided, and it sort of feels... It feels off in retrospect that David Duchovny has this influence on the series, and Gillian Anderson doesn't, even though they're meant to be basically equals.
You're really into it, though. It might be a preference. Maybe she didn't want that.
Oh, that's true. I mean, I can't say for sure.
It might be as well, when you're playing a long-running character like Mulder, you've got that insight into the character that a writer who's just coming in might not. So after a while, you could have a decent stab at writing for him.
Yes, weirdly, that came up, of all things, in a 50 Shades of Grey video.
Oh dear.
No. There's a reason for this. Basically, it was for 50 Shades Darker. A guy called Dan Olsen, who does a lot of YouTube videos, was doing a retrospective on the trilogy of the films.
Okay.
And one thing between film 1 and film 2 is they fired the director and writer, who were both women, and replaced them with two men. The writer was married to E.L. James, so nepotism.
So E.L. James is the author of 50 Shades?
Yep. And her husband wrote the second and third films.
Oh, okay.
The director primarily worked in TV, and the point he was making was there's consistency between the films is largely because you've got a TV director coming in, the actors already know what they're doing. In TV, the director doesn't get a lot of prep time, so they usually go to the actors and say, you need to give me more input into the characters. I can't dictate things like a film director would.
Yeah.
So that would explain there will be a lot of deferring to David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson about character because, yeah, they're the constants, the writers aren't.
Yeah, makes sense.
Except the directors especially aren't consistent.
Mm.
So that does make sense as well. We've veered off. We'll get back to Travellers.
He's that desperate not to talk about Travellers.
One thing I liked, and it's a good one where if you don't stop and think about it, you don't really pick up on it, of when the christening of the X-Files. I mean, they're not christened in this episode. They've been established for a while. But it's when he goes to the secretary and says, she saw the name in an X-File, and that's the unclassified stuff. And he said, well, why didn't you put it under you? And she says, ran out of room. Lots of room in X. Lots of room in X. And I like that as, yeah, that actually makes sense.
Something so arbitrary.
Yeah, but yes, they should be under you, but you can't because there's too many of them. I like that as a sort of world-building detail and explaining why we have this designation.
I like the fact that the X-Files purely exist for this reason as well. The fact that there are cases we couldn't solve and we had to put the files somewhere.
Yeah.
Not that this is the start of someone actually looking at X-Files. They're just something that we dump away in that cabinet over there.
Exactly. I mean, you can also get into the whole, given the X-Files is, that report is meant to be the end of the process, and Mulder uses it as the starting point or has active cases.
Yeah.
Which, when you stop and think about it, is absolutely insane. The X-Files should not exist as a concept. But we wouldn't have a serious talk about it otherwise, so here we are.
I also like the way this episode kind of shows how times have changed with, how quick procedure is in the X-Files in present day. You have the bit with the forensic scientist in this episode where he takes a tox sample and says you'll get the results in 6 to 8 weeks.
Yes, yeah, the speed of technology these days. And it also, the fact people are, the trick with phoning him up at the bar I like. That's the thing you see in older Simpsons episodes, is you have to, if you know where someone might be, you ring that place and ask for them.
Because there's no personal phones or anything like that.
And otherwise you would have to go over there in person to see if they're there. So
yeah.
They've got the feel of the 1950s. It's come down very well. I mean, it looks about right.
Apparently they had to throw that all together very quickly as well, because of course at this stage, we don't have any Gillian Anderson in this episode, for example, because she's filming her movie scenes at this time.
And which is odd, because I thought they were finished at this point.
So it was all flung together on a shoestring when they decided they were going to do a 1950s flashback episode.
Yeah, and they've done a remarkable job. It is, presumably it's reshoots or something at this point, because I thought they were meant to be done, because that's why the stuff at the start of the season happens.
I read that's why she's not here, as she was shooting some of her scenes.
But I wonder if it's reshoots, or the test screening had not gone well or something.
I don't know. You bear in mind they sometimes don't film them in order as well, so this one could have been filmed earlier in sequence.
Yeah.
I feel it fell at a good place, though. It doesn't feel out of place here. It
feels like a good one to follow up the Red and the Black.
Yeah.
This feels like we're going to just let everything simmer for a bit, and we're going to push into the past briefly to give you a sort of sense of the scale of things, but then not do the syndicate stuff.
It's a strange episode because it's not really a conspiracy episode, but it's more connected to the conspiracy than the average Monster of the Week.
Yeah. It feels, although I suppose if they flow it together at the last second, that explains why Bill Mulder kind of feels extraneous to this.
Yeah.
I think it's the whole, you could have written Bill Mulder out and then you'd lose the Mulder framing device and the episode would otherwise be unchanged.
Yeah. It's just that one hook to get Mulder to, our Fox Mulder, into meeting Arthur Dales.
Yeah. And it's kind of flimsy when you sort of really look at it like that. Do we have anything else? Because I think it's, as you said, it's not as fun an episode as it feels like it should have been.
No, I think the most interesting thing about the episode, and again, it might be more interesting to American viewers than it ultimately was to me, is just the setting, kind of in America's great kind of Cold War communist fear sort of climate. Because there is a lot of it that harks back to that, of the general kind of fear atmosphere of people turning on each other, of the kind of absolute power that this, do you call them HUAC or something like that?
Yeah, the House Un-American Committee.
Yeah, the general kind of power that they hold, because the prosecutor who prosecuted the Rosenbergs, it even specialises in there, which is why I think he might be a real person.
Yeah.
He is really scary.
Yes.
And a lot of the intensity of the episode kind of follows through on this, of both him and later J. Edgar Hoover, and them just having far too much power and far too much ability just to destroy people.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could also say very charitably, it's a great illustration of the corruption that will only intensify by the time you get to the 1990s. It's subtler, though. It's less overt than that.
I think it's actually more open than that in my mind, because these people aren't hidden. They're very equivalent to the Syndicate, and we can draw a clear parallel to them. But the Syndicate in the present day have to work in the shadows.
Oh, that's what I mean. The present is more subtle than the past.
Yeah.
They've been much more blatant back here.
In the past, these people could just do this in plain day under the guise of we're doing what's best for the people.
Yeah, and that doesn't fly anymore. Plus, you've got the internet. Well, the fledgling internet is making control of information harder.
Yeah. So the parallels you can draw there are the most interesting part of the episodes. But ultimately, it's not really part of my past as an English person. And therefore, I found some bits a bit hard to follow, and I didn't get all of the kind of historical references in this because it's stuff I don't know about.
Yeah.
Which I think is why it falls a bit flat for me. It's probably an episode that, if I was American, if this is something I'd learnt about, I'd be more interested in it.
Yes, I think that's fair.
So ultimately, It's all right. It's probably an average episode, but I wouldn't say it's one of the great ones. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did of some of the other flashback ones, like Unusual Suspects, which is fun and more connected.
Yes. I mean, I think the best thing from the episode really is both incarnations of Arthur Dales, who we will see again later, both do a tremendous job. It's actually nice to see them come back in again.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not a bad character, but, you know, for our first touch of this is like the first official X-File and all the rest of it, you kind of wanted a little more interesting case.
Yeah, I mean, something involving Roswell, I think, would have been kind of what you'd expect, really.
Yeah.
A lingering after effect of that or something. Or, I don't know, an earlier, a middling encounter with the black oil or something.
Or I'd go for more, a monster of the week that was more overtly monstrous, like a werewolf plot or something like that.
Well, yeah, given isn't the first X-File meant to be about werewolves?
Yeah, I thought it did say that previously.
It must have been Shadows, I must have said that. Chris, why do you not do a flashback? I know you can't have Arthur Dales, but flashback to who have to deal with the werewolf story.
Even if we'd made it a bit older still, you could have probably made quite a fun episode for it, because the 1930s was the horror movie monster boom. So you could have kind of gone back a bit better like that, I feel. Yeah,
though, I think we'd have to... There's a problem with when the FBI was founded, I think. I'm not sure when that happened. I think the 30s is too early.
30s would have been the Pinkertons.
Yeah, and the precursor.
But, well, all right then. The 1950s was when Hammer was founded.
Yeah.
So you could have a more classic horror kind of feel to it in that sense.
That's true.
Even if we're not going back to our kind of Lon Chaney Jr., Boris Karloff sort of monsters.
I know why they didn't do it, though. Postmodern Prometheus has already stolen the gimmick.
Yeah, I guess so.
We've had our 50s style film.
Yeah. No Creature of the Black Lagoon here.
Alas. Oh, well, shall we get on to something else?
Yes.
So we have Mind's Eye, directed by Kim Manners, written by Tim Minear, and first broadcast on the 19th of April 1998. Guest stars: Lily Taylor played Marty Glenn, who was in The Haunting, High Fidelity, Conjuring, The Scorch Trials, the major in the film.
Yeah, that's the second one, I think.
It is, and Leatherface. I know. We also have Blue Mancuma, who played Detective Panic, who was indeed the guy from Ghost in the Machine.
Ah, yeah.
And Peter Kalamis, who played Daniel Costa, who was the prosecutor, is a mainstay of the X-Files because he was in Lazarus, Fresh Bones, and Small Potatoes. Also does some voice work. He's been in Dragon Ball Z, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, but also Sliders.
Okay, cool.
So, with a reference to Wikipedia, would you like to do as a summary of Mind's Eye?
Yep, sure. Our episode this time takes place in Delaware. We see a woman bringing groceries back to her apartment when she suddenly has an incredibly violent vision of somebody with a knife attacking a man in a bathroom. A little later, the police are called to a motel where they find the woman, whose name is Marty Glenn, in the bathroom along with a body of someone who's recently been stabbed to death. As the police go to arrest her, they realise she is totally blind. Detective Pennock is absolutely baffled by how a blind woman could have committed such a violent crime, so he calls Mulder and Scully in to investigate. Pennock's theory is that Marty somehow has a sixth sense that allows her to kill, potentially an echolocation that allows her to see in the dark. They interrogate Marty, who is quite bitchy and unhelpful. She comes under further suspicion because she mentions things that she could only possibly know if she was the guilty one. Despite the fact that all fingers seem to point to Marty, Mulder is convinced that she is innocent and wants to prove it. However, Scully goes back to the crime scene and searches the bathroom, finding a bloody leather glove which fits Marty in a razor disposal bin. While Marty is at the police station, she has another vision and sees the murderer approaching a woman in a bar. Marty manages to identify the bar via her vision and demands to make her phone call. She, of course, calls straight to the bar and warns the man, who is named Gotts, to leave the woman alone. Although Mulder is still adamant that Marty cannot possibly be the killer, Scully believes that it's possible that Marty may not be blind, and may herself even be unaware of this fact. They have a full eye exam, in which it proves that Marty is completely blind. However, she has a vision while in the machine, and Mulder witnesses her pupils suddenly contract and realises that there is some kind of reaction going on. Mulder starts to believe that she may have some visions within her mind's eye, and this is what she's reacting to. Marty is released as they don't have enough evidence to convict her. However, on her way home, she has a vision again and this time sees Gotts attacking the woman from the bar. She's too late to save her and returns to the police station with blood all over her hands, confessing to both murders. Mulder investigates further into Marty's past and discovers that her mother was killed in a similar way while pregnant. It is revealed that Gotts is actually Marty's biological father, and that Marty was in the womb when her mother was killed, it being a contributing factor potentially to why she's blind. We also learn that Gotts has spent the previous 30 years in prison, this being Marty's entire life, and so all Marty has seen through that time are visions of the prison. The violent visions of him killing people, of course, have only come after his release. Marty is released on the understanding that she helps lead the police to Gotts's location. She sends Mulder and Scully to the place where she says Gotts should be found, while Pennant takes her back to her apartment to pick up some things before she goes into protective custody. While she is packing up, Marty has another vision and sees Gotts in the lobby of her apartment. She knocks Pennock out and takes his gun, waiting for Gotts to come up to her room. Mulder very quickly figures out that Marty would rather kill Gotts rather than have to experience these visions of him being in prison again, which would effectively mean that she would be put back in prison herself. They hurry back to Marty's apartment only to find that she has shot Gotts dead. She is sent to prison herself, awaiting trial, however reveals to Mulder that she is happier because she's finally free. She no longer sees her father's murders and is left seeing a vision from his past, which is a vision of the ocean.
Thank you. So, shall we start with the thing you said about Mind's Eye while watching it?
Oh, you mean that it's Oubliette?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it was something that was also picked up on when I was reading around this by, I think, Cinefastique or someone like that when they reviewed it, is the fact that this episode so closely mirrors the kind of just general plot and themes of Oubliette, but doesn't have the same kind of emotional hit because you don't have that kind of, Mulder connecting with, I think she's called Lucy, because he's kind of viewing her as being like Samantha. He kind of very quickly hits on Marty being innocent and really kind of feeling for her, almost seeming to fancy her at some points in this episode, but you still don't have that emotional connection.
Yeah, I mean, that lack of specificity makes it a bit weird because in Oubliette, it was very much like it was having a kind of familial sibling relationship with Lucy. In this one, I don't understand what Mulder's doing other than she must be innocent. I mean, other than the crime is absurd, but she must be innocent anyway.
But it's one of those locked room things of, we know Mulder reads the script and that she can't be guilty of this, but it's the obvious explanation. It's Occam's razor. She specifically asks for the room by number and is there around the time of the murder, is the only one found present, and she's covered in blood. It's kind of open shut.
Yes. Well, I think contrasting it to Oubliette is interesting because in this one, we have them trying to throw the book at her, and the crime itself is absurd.
Mm.
It's a case of how on earth can this blind woman overpower a healthy drug dealer?
I think it's, though, that how on earth could this blind woman overpower this healthy drug dealer, but the facts speak for themselves and she's somehow done it.
Yeah, and also vanish the murder weapon, which we'll get back to. Versus Oubliette, which was, she didn't do the crime, but she's totally in cahoots with the guy who did the crime and knows exactly where they are, despite having no opportunity to do this and that simultaneous abduction with the nosebleed thing.
Mm.
And the fact that the temporal relation to that, everyone sort of ignores the fact it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And the other thing about it is, Oubliette has a ticking clock, and this episode doesn't.
I think your ticking clock in this episode is just that the villain's going to keep killing.
Yeah.
In the other one, it's literally, we have to do this quick or this little girl's going to die.
That incentive in Oubliette is more understandable, and ultimately why Marty would be being very confusing. Actually, the whole motive doesn't make sense until the end, and even then it doesn't make sense of what she's been doing. But when her motive is, I don't want to be trapped in prison again.
Yeah, I was going to get to that, but I actually like the kind of, it's almost a twist, not quite, at the end, the reasoning behind why Marty's behaving the way she is. It's the fact that she's essentially been a prisoner her entire life because she's always been seeing through her father's eyes. So our nice flip around at the end where she's actually incarcerated for murder is at least she's not a prisoner anymore because she's always seeing the ocean now.
Yeah.
So she's got this beautiful image and she's no longer just seeing the wall of a cell like for 30 years.
Which is fine. I mean, you do sort of start picking it up and say, so he never had visitors, he never watched films, read books, left his cell for 30 years.
I suppose largely he wouldn't, to be fair. I know they always get time away from their cells and stuff like that, but at the same time, she's essentially served a 30-year prison sentence.
Yeah, I get that bit, but I mean, he must have had other experiences in prison. He can't have been staring at the cell wall for 30 years.
No, but at the same time, it's a prison. It's not designed to be nice.
And
It's
yeah.
not a spa.
No, I do get that, but the way she describes it though is, I've gone back to prison and all I get is the grey wall of the cell. And I think it as a motivation, it's great for her. The problem is that doesn't actually explain any of her earlier instances.
Her earlier instances were trying to stop him killing because I can't imagine it's very nice to watch continuous murders either.
True, but she's going to the crime scenes after the murder's been done. She's not trying to preempt any of them. I know she can't really preempt them.
She can't preempt them because she's seeing them real time.
Exactly. So,
it's not precognition.
Exactly, but that makes the one where she goes to the woman who's killed in the alleyway.
Yeah, the inspiration for the episode was actually a report, and I think it's called something like the Stargate Project. It's a multi-million-pound project that the CIA reportedly did investigate about a psychic phenomena called remote viewing, which is exactly what we see in this episode of you sit in a room and you can see what someone else is seeing potentially miles away.
It comes up occasionally, but the Extraterrestrials Guide to the X-Files does have a section on remote viewing because you see the transcripts of it.
Okay.
And the problem ultimately turns out to be that the person doing the remote viewing is a pervert. So basically it's a case of, where are you? Oh, I'm in Gorbachev's bedroom or something. Oh, what's he doing? He's declaring war. Where are you actually? Pamela Anderson's room. That kind of thing. It's a case of, it's when you come down to it, it's a case of, yeah.
Yeah. But in the case of this is apparently genuine remote viewing, all done for the slightly unsatisfactory reasons of he stabbed her mother while pregnant and it somehow blinded her, but also given them this connection.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's the familial connection feels like it should be more significant, but isn't. I
buy Oubliette's connection more of it's like some kind of super extreme Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
Where she's been trapped in this position with this kidnapper for years and she started to kind of think on the same wavelength as him. I think even though they're both outlandish sci-fi plots, that one just feels a bit more solid.
True. I think, while I would largely agree, I think the only snag to that is she's empathizing with the kidnapped girl, not the kidnapper. Because she's nosebleeding instead of the new kidnapped girl, isn't she?
She is, but it's all done because of him. He's still the
contra, yeah. But it is a bit. Ultimately, I think both episodes. Oubliette's the better version of this story, but I think both of them don't quite work.
Oubliette, I still think, is a middling episode. I know it's a fan favourite. It's an incredibly popular episode, but I would take Oubliette over this one. Yes. I think it's still the stronger episode.
I mean, very cynically, I want to say, does fan favourite mean Mulder cries in it?
I think fans often like the ones that have an emotional impact. So, this has developed Mulder's character and allowed him this kind of empathic relationship. You see him vulnerable. A lot of episodes are popular. I mean, just look at Detours, where you have Mulder injured and Scully caring for him. It's a very popular episode.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's one of those things where we go back to the X-Files overall and you say, that's great. Gonna have to bring up Emily again, where Mulder threatened a doctor. That's
just tarnished your view of Mulder going forward.
I mean, how can it not, though? Because that was so out of sorts, how he behaved in that one episode. What was going on?
It's okay, Nick. It's okay. It's past. It's gone now.
It's not, though, is it? It's part of the conspiracy. It's going to keep on lingering forevermore.
I don't think we presented Marty's disability in a fantastic way in this episode. I mean, I will say it's a lot more sensitive than the X-Files tends to be. This isn't like the X-Files and autism as we've seen previously. Their goal for Marty was to not create a martyr. So, not have this heroic blind person who's kind of risen above everything and is a paragon of virtue, which is why she's catty, she's vicious, she's just unpleasant to be around. The idea that just because you've got a disability, it doesn't make you a good person.
Yeah.
But also they want to show she was independent and not reliant on anyone, and it kind of works to a point. But then there is also the bit where she leaves a police station. And I know somebody who works for a blind charity, that learning your routes as a blind person is incredibly difficult. Because you've got to memorise like all these paths, because you don't have the visual stimulus to even know where you'd walk to the shops, for example, or something like that. So she leaves a police station, presumably that's relatively unfamiliar to her, and just blunders straight into traffic.
Well, I got the impression that she walked into traffic basically to get that guy to help her.
Oh, you actually thought it was deliberate?
I thought it was deliberate what she was doing. I mean, I do take the point of she can't function like this.
Well,
she should be.
I thought it was just the desperation. She shouted and asked where the road is, and someone said, "Oh, it's 4 blocks away," and then she ran into traffic. So I think it was more her haste.
I sort of, I mean, again, with open interpretation, I got it to mean that she was hoping to get someone to sort of say, "Look, I'll help you find it," because then he guides her to the entrance to the alley, and then she sort of waves him away.
Yeah.
One thing, though, that strikes me about the whole not trying to present her as incapable or anything, or a martyr or anything, is put me in mind of Red Dragon.
Oh, Reba. Yeah.
Because when you see her shots, like when she's interacting with, I've forgotten his actual name, the Tooth Fairy.
Dollahide, yeah.
Dollahide. They make a point in Red Dragon of showing you all the little tricks and ways she copes with being blind.
Oh, I like things like when you see her cutting the pie and she uses a toothpick to measure where the centre is.
Yes, that kind of thing. Yeah. And there's a whole lot of very careful touching everything. And where I feel this episode goes wrong is the reveal she's blind comes at just before the opening credits start.
Yeah.
Nothing in the scene up to that gives you the faintest impression she's blind.
No.
She operates like a full vision person.
You see her kind of unpacking her groceries and navigating her house and
switching on the TV.
Yeah.
It feels weird. I mean, I'm sure blind people do watch TV, but
there was a comment I read for this episode where they had an argument with the people who control the lighting in it, because they pointed out the fact she is completely blind. She's not sighted in any way. That why would she need to keep turning on lights and stuff like that? And they said, oh, but we need that for the benefit of the audience and stuff like that.
That's very true. However...
But that's another thing you see in Red Dragon is she works in a dark room. And, she doesn't need the lights, and she is absolutely conscious of this, the fact that she can just sit there in the dark.
Yeah. Well, I think, and this makes me think of Game of Thrones again, versus the Two Towers.
Yeah.
Because most people will be familiar with Game of Thrones towards the end. Basically, you had the pitch black battle scenes in the middle of the climactic battle. And everyone said, I can't see what's going on. And one of the retorts was, oh, it's realistic. And then a short while later, everyone started saying, hey, remember the Two Towers that had this enormous night battle where you could see absolutely everything and no one cared where the light was coming from? We could see what was going on.
Yeah.
And so I think they could, with some inventive thought, they could have shot those scenes in her apartment and made it clear the lights are off, but still made it visible for us, the audience.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's... Again, I don't know how much of that is in aid of just making the sting work that she's blind.
Yeah, it's obviously working on the different levels of blindness as well, because, of course, blindness is a scale.
Well, that's what Scully suggests partway through, isn't it?
Oh, Scully's suggestion is she has a kind of blind sight. So there is this kind of idea, and I don't know entirely the science behind it, that, you may be able to see something, but because you don't have any kind of frame of reference of what that is, you don't understand that what it is sight. Because you are a blind person who believes you are totally blind, so you're not cognizant of what this visual stimulus is. So I think that's the idea they're getting at, is the fact that she believes she's totally blind, but is actually seeing something to some degree. Because, of course, you got your levels of blindness too, is some people can perceive shapes or light, the difference between light and dark and things like that. It's not always you can't see a thing.
Could be completely wrong on this, so you might be able to correct me, but isn't it like total blindness is actually kind of rare? Usually can see something, not to a usable capacity.
Total blindness is usually if you've got some trauma or, you've had to have your eyes tragically removed or something like that.
I think it's actually, that's not common, is it?
Yeah, you have scales. Well, even you can be registered blind and still have some degree of sight.
Yeah.
But of course, it's still a disability. It still impacts your life terribly, and that's why it's a blindness scale.
Well, it's that legal thing, isn't it? Like, being able to drive, you have to be able to see to a point, otherwise you're not safe.
Well, I remember, this used to be my mother when she was working. She used to be like an assessor who went round to blind people's house and kind of helped them fill out their PIP forms and things, and see if they needed anything to help around their house. And some common things were things like white stripes to put along stairs, because, if you've got low vision, you might not be able to see the edge of a staircase, but if you painted a big yellow line across it, they have the kind of contrast of colour and they'd be able to see just the yellow and know that's where the step was. So, you do have these kind of degrees and things that can be done to make your life a little easier. But obviously not in the case of poor old Marty here, who's entirely blind.
Yeah. It's still odd then that post-credit opening credits, Marty behaves a lot more like you'd expect a blind person to behave, as in she seems to be lacking a lot of movement autonomy. She can still do things on her own, but she's not rushing around or sort of moving effortlessly in the same way.
I've got to imagine it must be disorientating as well, because it's kind of inferred that she's always seeing through her father's eyes.
Yeah, how she copes with that is not clear.
I suppose it's this kind of thing where you must develop a kind of filter over time or something like that. But imagine you're going around your house trying to unload the laundry while you're seeing somebody stabbing someone in a bathroom.
To be fair, he would be doing some incarceration prison stuff at the time, not stabbing anyone. But yeah, though that does, again, that's a fault with the episode. I feel is how it's shown in the episode. It looks like these moments are coming to her, and that's a specific vision that we see. I don't think we ever give an impression until she says that this is a constant stream she's getting.
No, it does seem like it's a vision earlier in the episode, but she herself says that this is what she's seeing all the time. Yeah,
so as you said, how do you, other than, because you can't just close your eyes.
It's supposed to just be the shock reaction because he's suddenly done something gruesome.
Yeah. But that does sort of say, prison's not meant to be the best life. Are you telling me that this violent man has never caused problem in prison?
I imagine it'd be much less, though. He's not going to be running around murdering everyone in prison.
True, but you could presumably get into fights and things.
Oh yeah, I imagine you would.
So it's odd, I feel.
Red Dragon and Manhunter are both great films, and I agree with you, it portrays it a lot better than this.
Yeah, I mean, I think my problem really is it's the fact it's done as the shock for the start, and admittedly it's a good sting, but it just calls into question all the rest of it, because I think you kind of needed to eliminate all the stuff in her apartment, like just have the police turn up at the motel room and discover a blind woman there.
Yeah, I think part of the problem at the start is maybe we have to kind of set the stage by showing that she's had this vision and that's what's led her there. But at the same time, that eliminates the mystery.
Yes.
We know she didn't do it.
Yeah. So I think you're on something there. I mean, we try not to do rewriting it, but I think we have to, and I know why they don't do it, but you have to pull focus away from Marty and push it somewhere else so you don't know why she's doing what she's doing. Have her do these incomprehensible things that pay off somehow.
Yeah.
Again, it's like a few episodes where you feel like the central idea is fine, the execution is botched. There was a different way of doing this, and it would have been stronger if you had.
But as always, we have the episode flaw is that Mulder takes one look at Marty and says, yep, innocent.
Yes. And it's not... Lucy, I got where he's coming from. And because he's being sympathetic because he's got this rap sheet and everything. And Marty also has a really sort of checkered past, and that he just kind of brushes past it without even trying to explain it.
Very similarly as well, that she's been arrested half a dozen times herself.
Possession and drug dealing and everything else, yeah. And
of course, the guy who's killed at the start was a drug dealer.
Yeah. As much as the American police force, they've got all their things and everything, it's the fact they keep not turning up the murder weapon doesn't seem to faze them as much as it should. Case of, you've arrested her on the scene of the crime, cool, she's evaporated the murder weapon. You should probably be focusing on that a lot more. Because how on earth has she hidden it?
Yeah. No, the murder weapon's a problem, and ultimately, though, the episode does acknowledge that's why they can't hold her.
Yeah.
Because all you've got linking into this is a glove that happens to fit her.
Well, I think, the glove is just weird. I mean, I don't quite understand why he pried open the razor disposal slot to shove it in there.
Or she did, it was unclear.
It was unclear. But then, I just don't get anyone's behaviour, because he's killing people with the switchblade, which you'd think forensics would be able to tell it's a small blade, kind of about the size of a switchblade. That's easily concealable. He's probably got it on him. If she doesn't have it with her...
The killer does.
Yeah, and we think, and Mulder's insisting there's another killer, that person probably has the switchblade.
I saw a criticism of the episode as well. I think it was just a general considered goof, is that the detective apparently turned the apartment upside down, but managed to miss the razor disposal bin in the bathroom.
Yeah, it took Scully just sort of looking at him. Oh, wait a minute, that's been pulled away from the wall.
And Scully found it immediately.
Yeah.
As well, on going in there.
So, yeah, that's... Coming off the back of Travels as well, it's interesting that Travels was thrown together at the last second because Gillian Anderson was needed to do film work.
Mm.
And there seems to be a running thing through Series 5 of just... There's a whole load of junk and weirdness and hastily written scripts. Because this one feels like, again, it needed to go back for some further rewrites. Because we've got that anecdote about Tessos Dos Bichos and how they went through so many rewrites.
Oh, Second Salmon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They cycled right the way back around the colour scheme to get to the same one, and that still didn't help.
Yeah.
You got to wonder how many revisions some of these other ones where there's just real blatant problems.
I was thinking it, and again, we always say we don't like to rewrite it and then rewrite the episode. But I thought you could make this into one of the Blackly comical episodes quite nicely if you flip the perspective. So you have him as the kind of deadbeat criminal who somebody is ruining his life as he goes along. You know, somebody's phoning ahead, somebody's disposing of people he's going to see, and he has no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
From his perspective, it would have been kind of entertaining.
I'd like that. I mean, I can see how you'd do that as well. So the sting would be, you know, he's gone to that motel room and killed all the other people.
Mm.
And then, you know, the police turn up at almost the wrong moment, but he's able to get away. And then you somehow indicate that it's Marty made the phone call and that she's blind. And that's your setup for everything going forward.
But see if you make it more humorous, like he's chatting up with a woman in the bar and a mysterious phone call comes in and manages to wreck his chances for him.
Yeah.
You know, just that there's this kind of unseen force messing with him, essentially.
Yeah, basically the concept should have been handed to Vince Gilligan, who I feel could have done this.
Because I feel from his perspective it would have been like that. You know, he's got no idea who this person is who just keeps messing over all his plans.
Yeah, and it does also feel that the part where he finds out who it is doesn't... I'm not sure why he's there to watch her. It's actually kind of weird when he sort of turns up to look at her.
In that bit, yeah. You know, eventually he stalks her down, presumably with the intent on killing her, but you never find out if he understands their actual connection and realises it's his daughter.
Yeah, that's
because
not good at all.
The second they come face to face, she kills him.
I think he does when he looks at the nameplates on the building, when he's hunting for apartments.
You're assuming that she's got her mother's maiden name or something, and he recognises
I suspect that would be it.
But he never gets to speak to her in the whole episode.
No, and I feel that's a mistake. Other than her hissed line before she shoots him. That has made me realise another problem that you'd think would come up.
Mm.
While her visions, this constant remote viewing she's got going on would be kind of possibly explain the drug stuff, because presumably this helps block it out, or at least blot it, or, you know, make it palatable. Are you telling me that from the point Marty learned to speak, and possibly even beforehand, to, I don't know, like age 11 when she might be cognizant enough to hide this, she's never told anyone what she's seeing? Or used bad language they used in prison?
If she can hear, she's it's sight. She's not necessarily hearing what they're doing, is she?
True. Well, actually, no, I think she does get audio. We at least get audio when she sees a vision of him killing her.
We do, but I'm not sure if she does.
We don't, but then that becomes very weird if she doesn't. But she's still seeing things. You'd think that, you know, when they sort of ask her about if she's blind, as a child, she's not going to stand to hide this, is she?
No.
So she's going to say, oh, I see the bars on the walls, I see the grey, oh, I see... Actually, no, I don't have words for what I'm seeing. I just... what are you looking at? Can you say this right?
Anything happens when two people share a cell, cuz.
For example. It feels like that's another problem, is that she should have had a very strange childhood.
Mm.
The other thing, of course, is how does the syndicate, the consortium, weird government stuff, how have they not swooped on father and daughter somehow and figured out this is happening and said, okay, you deployed in the field, you tell us what he's doing?
Yeah. It's such an exploitable power.
If the CIA genuinely spent millions of dollars on trying to get this working, and you've got a working pair here, how have you not said, okay, you know you hate him, however we're going to pay you mountains of cash? I mean, I would say she should still kill him, but I'm sure he could be bought.
Mm.
And the government, like Softlight, they're not going to necessarily play fair.
Softlight's the one I was kind of thinking about. I was just thinking if we still had Mr. X in operation, he would have been all over this.
Yeah, and I don't know why one of the other informants or the other double agents hasn't grabbed her.
Mm. I guess we don't have a double agent at the moment because we've just taken Marita out of commission too.
Yeah.
We are between double agents. I think my other problem with it is that Scully, other than finding a glove, Scully kind of sits this one out.
Yeah, also she's into... It's again that thing where people don't seem to understand how to do Scully after a certain point in the series, where she either veers right into skepticism or actually feels like she should be at this point in time, and there's no middle ground.
To be fair, she's not that skeptical in this episode. She posits the idea that she might have some degree of sight, does the test and they say, nope, totally blind, and then Scully kind of sits out the rest of the episode.
Yeah, I think it's because someone said, what do we do now?
I think Scully needs to either concede here or think of another solution.
It's the fact she doesn't offer another solution feels wrong, and this feels like very early X-Files where that was how they thought she'd be written, and then they stopped doing it after a while.
Mm.
But she's not quite as bad as she was in Kitchen and Gary, where she felt really cynical for some reason.
I feel you're missing, though. We found a glove, we don't have a murder weapon. Is it possible she can actually see and she did it? No, it's not possible. Okay, she's got an accomplice then.
Yeah.
We don't kind of go down any other line of thought.
No, and that doesn't feel like how any real world things would do, because you are trying to go for realism as much as it's a fantastical solution.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine this going to trial and actually trying to sentence a blind woman who the defense will prove without a shadow of a doubt is blind? I mean, the only reason she goes to prison at the end is she clubbed a policeman, stole his gun,
and shot someone
point blank in the face.
And to be fair, it was a senseless killing because they were all geared up to capture this guy, but she wanted him dead because otherwise it's her straight back in that cell.
Yeah, and again, I think we did cover it before, but it still comes back to, I would have liked it a lot more if that was her plan from the start. It's just that transparently wasn't the plan until that very late stage of the episode.
Yeah.
And all her actions don't bear that out.
Yeah, you're saying she could have been more clever about it, that you realise at the end that everything she has done has led to her being alone and able to kill him.
Yeah, and it wasn't because, like, the first two ones where she rushes to the motel room and he rushes to the alley, she will be able to see full well he's no longer in the building.
Yeah.
I don't get what she's trying to do in this first one when she gets arrested. Because it looks like she's trying to clean this scene up, which is odd.
I wasn't sure why she was there either.
No.
I guess only to see if it actually happened.
I suppose that's the...
verify if what she's seeing is accurate.
Yeah, but then we got the going to the alleyway. It's a case of by the time she got close, she'd know that the woman was dead by the time she finds the dumpster with her body in. And then it's also a bit odd when she's trying to search because she knows exactly where it was.
She must have seen him dump her in the dumpster. And, because she's seen from his eyes, she'd have an idea of the layout of the alleyway as well.
And so that comes coming back to the whole... The way the episode portrays it, it looks like it's singular visions, but she describes it as a constant. And I don't think they ever reconcile that.
Yeah. It's one of those where you just kind of pull the thread and it starts to unravel, I think. It really does.
We should probably leave it alone.
But I guess the last thing to talk about then really is Mulder's attitude.
Oh, God.
And Mulder's odd obsession with Marty.
Yeah, and I think you did touch on the start, and Oubliette, I don't think it literally made sense, but you as a viewer understood where he was coming from, and they did specifically name-check Samantha. I have a sneaking suspicion.
And Oubliette all kind of... It is a murder case, but it's also all focused around a kidnapping.
Yeah.
Which, like, Samantha was kidnapped, so you've got the connection of the similarly aged girls being taken.
Exactly, and still, ticking clock scenario for it as well. Or since ticking clock can mean something to people involved.
It's kind of interesting when we keep referencing Red Dragon here when Oubliette was very obviously inspired by Silence of the Lambs as well.
Yeah. I do wonder as well if Redux 2 torpedoed an idea for this. Like, say they were going to do Oubliette again.
Yeah.
So you're going to have the whole Mulder identifies with the victim. It's kind of shakier from Marty. Or maybe actually there was a kidnapped girl at some point in the development of the script.
It does play Mulder to strength, to be fair, because Mulder is supposed to be empathic, and people often forget that he's got this background in kind of criminal psychology and things like that.
Well, I mean, there's all the times when he's unempathetic as hell.
At least Mulder sympathising with the victim is accurately, it's Mulder written right.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if this script at one stage had a person held at knife point. Maybe Marty had a sister, a cousin, some relative or something.
Yeah.
And that's what the actual force of the episode was. I mean, I'm speculating just out
Or
of
you'd make
nothing.
Marty a bit younger so he gets that kind of big brother feel for her.
It's pure speculation, but I do wonder if this is like Tim Minear had this idea when they were doing season 4 and it was too late to put in the script for it or anything.
Mm.
And season 5, the opportunity arose. So, yeah, we're going to do Oubliette again, but we're not going to admit we're doing Oubliette again. And
your problem is, as we left it in Redux, is Samantha is potentially an alive adult with a family living somewhere in Washington.
which is exactly what I was going for. I think the idea was to do something like Oubliette again. Redux 2 happened. It's a case of, we need to take all the Samantha stuff out of the script. And now Mulder doesn't make a lot of sense because that was the key to getting her into this. Because we've apparently resolved the Samantha plotline in one of the least... No one remembers that reveal happened at this point.
I know, right?
It's because it's so bad. It was atrocious. But I think that's part of why Mulder's kind of weird, is that I think his motivation has been cut somewhere. And as you said, he latches onto her with an intensity he doesn't do to a lot of other women. Like, it's very odd to contrast it to Excelsis Day and his absolute lack of care in that episode.
No, true. I think Mulder just flip-flops depending on who's writing him. But to give Tim Minear some credit, I think he's got Mulder right in this episode.
Oh, yeah, I think yes.
I don't think he's got Scully quite right, but he's got Mulder there.
Yeah, and I think, in a very general sense, Mulder is easy for everyone to grab hold of, though I think it's because you can do the...
Well, we've said for a while that when Mulder's being a skeptic, we felt that he's wrong previously. He doesn't feel right. Annoying, opinionated, dismissive. Mulder the believer is a lot nicer character.
Yes. And so I think it's Mulder is... Everyone grasps Mulder much easier. Scully befuddles so many writers, they don't know how to deal with her at all.
Yeah, I think you have to play Scully a bit like... I know she's the Dr. Watson of the story, but she's more like Sherlock Holmes. Scully is open to a supernatural explanation, but she has to disprove the obvious things first.
Yeah. And sort of the really pie in the sky stuff, she's got to say, well, is there another explanation for this?
Yeah.
Do we have anything else for Mind's Eye, or shall we?
I don't think so, really. I think we've covered all bases with that.
I think so. So next week we have the Pine-Bluff variant.
No, that's the second one. It's All Souls and the Pine-Bluff variant.
I shouldn't laugh just because I've heard the title of one of them, but wow. We'll look forward to that. If you'd like to get hold of us in the meantime, our email address is thingsargettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can hook us up on social media, and please do if you'd like us to promote any of your X-Files related things at the start of our episodes. You can find us on Twitter or Tumblr at @GetStrange42. You can find us on Mastodon at GetStrange42@universedon.com, or on Facebook, where we are found by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast. Additionally, if you're not sick of my voice by now, I also stream live 3 times a week on Twitch TV. That's Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 PM GMT or Saturdays at 5 PM GMT, where I just let's play whatever I'm currently playing on the PlayStation 5. It's currently Lies of P.
But we also have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsargettingstrange, where we have been posting the Let's Play of the first X-Files game, the X-Files FMV game from the PSX, and just having a weird time with it, I think is the best way of describing how we're finding it.
It's an odd game.
It's not a game. I've got complaints about the acting, the interface, the gameplay, how it handles death. So you can access that for as little as $3 a month, and there's also our bonus episode of us trying to review Catatonia's single Mulder and Scully.
Which, it should be noted, is the origin of the name of this channel.
Yes. And we intend to move on to other X-Files ephemera, like the PS2 X-Files game and the books, the comics, trading card games, and whatever else we can lay our hands on. Our theme music is Envision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on Computech.com, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, please remember,
the truth is out there.